How is everyone? Good, good, good. My name is Kathy Dykman. Just to give you a little background on what I do, I've worked at Facebook for a little over 4.5 years. I work in client measurement. So essentially at Facebook we have a number of different kind of measurement teams. We have a team that is charged with working with research partners. We have a team that is dedicated to working with clients to figure out things like what's impacting their bottom line, to measure their ad effectiveness, and I work on that team. So I head up the client team in EMEA. This is me on Facebook, and I think what Imran was saying about keeping up with the pace of change is a good point, and I know we talk about it a lot at conferences like this, but just as he kind of drew on his own personal experience to point out the importance of this, ironically, the very first time that it occurred to me, or that it was really clear that measurement as applied to mobile was important was back in 2000. I started my career working for a company that was owned by ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Associated Press, and Fox. It was called Voter News Service, and what we did was we made election calls on election night. And it was years since I realized how that experience has a carryover to the importance of measuring all elements and the danger that happens when you have significant bias in your estimates. So you think about my world is dedicated, my job is dedicated to helping advertisers measure their branding, their ROI. And I don't get a letter grade at the end of the day like we did in 2000, but what some people don't realize about the 2000 election and the call for Gore that was actually made by the networks, it's because they'd been using models that held up since 1972 over hundreds of gubernatorial and senatorial elections. But what they didn't have, because the world had changed and voting had changed, what they didn't have was the fact that people were voting via absentee. And that non-coverage bias, when the margins are really, really tight, have a big impact. And advertising, unlike a vote projection, isn't benefited from the fact that you know exactly what the outcome was, but it points to when you're systematically not measuring a major component of your campaign, that catastrophic failure could occur. So in thinking about this, what the world, what advertisers, what publishers, what we all need to measure if we're focused on ad effectiveness like I am, sums up to about the global spend across above-the-line activity, online activity, sums up to $713 billion. Now, I don't know about you, but I can barely, my finances are like an infinitesimal amount of that, and it's hard enough to keep track of. But the fact that if you take a look at mobile expenditures of that sum, I think Mary Meeker estimates that it's about 4% of overall expenditures within advertising, while 20% of time is spent on mobile. Why is that? I think we can ask ourselves as practitioners. No small part of that is that we haven't really figured out yet how to measure the impact of advertising on mobile. And there's a number of reasons. Sometimes tags don't work. Multi-touch attribution models aren't necessarily able to measure model. So there's parts that make it difficult for advertisers, systematic kind of technical difficulties that make it difficult for advertisers to measure. So while there are challenges, I think one opportunity that we've embraced at Facebook is we have a large base of mobile users worldwide. We last kind of announced this number, we only update it I think every 6 months or so, but back in June, we announced that we had 1.07 billion mobile users monthly on Facebook. So those are the people that are coming back to Facebook on a monthly basis that are at least logging in one time. If we take a look at how that compares worldwide, we have within the US 157 million within Germany and France, 21 million, and the UK, 29 million, Italy, 20, and in the Mideast and Africa, around 130 million. So what this provides is a good mobile base by which to observe not only patterns of mobility, what people are doing to kind of exploit behavioral information that we have on users, but in my world, it allows us to explore the impact of advertising and particularly take a look at insights that weren't previously afforded, such as taking a look at churn and gross ads. So while we have measurement systems to address what's going on in CPG within retail, one focus for the past year of mine has been working on rolling out a technique that we call telco outcome measurement. So essentially, I mentioned the over 1 billion people we have on mobile and the opportunity afforded to observe the impact on advertising. The reason that we have that is because within our mobile app, every time somebody logs in, we can collect the carrier in a privacy-safe manner, of course. We can collect the carrier, the device, the operating system, and we know certain things about individuals already, so gender, age, and having this information, and particularly being able to explore impact of advertising, is important for telcos and mobile providers, primarily because it's hard to measure impact on or measure sales and conversions on mobile. When you think about it, most of the sales don't occur online. They occur inside physical stores. I know a lot of OEMs have pushes to expand their websites and to sell devices online. The majority of them are occurring either in stores or within carrier retail locations as well. Also, it's hard to connect what happens online to connect what happens offline. Now, this is a challenge that you face whether you're in telco or whether you're in CPG. But because we're able to not only control what advertising people see, we can connect these two. And the other thing that makes it difficult to explore the impact of advertising on mobile or for telcos and for carriers is the purchase cycle is long. You think about it for CPG goods, which you can evaluate within the impact of advertising within a week. For telcos, you need a month, you need a 2 months. There's things that make the purchase cycle a little bit longer for device manufacturers, such as the cost of the device. You don't pick up a new Samsung S5 as easily as you would a new version of shampoo. There's also contracts and things like that are systematic kind of barriers to making a quick purchase. One of the reasons that when we rolled out kind of this technique to telco advertisers that we're particularly excited about is because if you take a look at conversions and conversions to mobile, what we previously inherited, and I know everybody in the room knows this already, but digital existed for 20, 25 years and inherited clicks as a measurement. And I think at Facebook and other kind of digital platforms as well have been beholden to actually measuring the things that create the value, things like likes, things like video views, things if you're YouTube, things like whether you've fanned a page or you interacted or engaged with an ad, and these things create value. But if you're an advertiser, the thing that's important to you is if your bottom line has been impacted, whether somebody is thinking differently about your brand, whether you've gotten a key message about your product across, and ultimately has a sale occurred. So when we had the opportunity to take a look at kind of whether conversions actually occurred among people that click, we found that 95% of the buyers out here never click. So if you're resting your entire measurement system, if it's predicated on whether people click online and their interactivity online, you're missing a trick. So just in kind of an overview of this closed loop system for measurement, kind of the first step, as in any of our business, is data collection. We do this through, as I mentioned, the privacy-safe method of capturing carrier location information, the device, the operating system when somebody logs into to Facebook. And as I mentioned before, of the 1.32 billion people that we have on Facebook, 1.07 billion of them are on mobile. So it's a good representative base by which to observe mobile conversions. The next thing, and this is the trickiest and this is the most important, is to ensure that you have parity between your control and exposed groups. So there's a number of different methods that advertisers use. We consider the gold standard for measuring ad effectiveness to be an experimental design where you randomly select people not to see your advertising and an equal group to see your advertising. And that some cases it can be tricky for a number of reasons. One, sometimes user bases or sample sizes don't afford for pure random design. And then the next thing is when you do use an alternate method, propensity score modeling or other accepted measures, the control selection, making sure your exposed group and knowing all the covariates that could possibly impact a decision for a conversion is very, very tricky. But then the final step is that it affords to look at incremental conversions. So I went over this, but first step, basically privacy, safe data collection, followed by experimental design, or either by a random poll or propensity score matching. For publishers, this is really tricky. I think one thing kind of we've learned that in the past is using methods such as propensity score modeling are very, very complex because ad delivery systems in this business are really, really complex. And they've evolved. Just to kind of go back to what we were saying about the pace of change, at Facebook, it's been our measurement systems have constantly had to adapt and to keep pace with the technologists that are developing our ads delivery system. And the problem is this: if the ads delivery system does a better job of actually delivering an ad to somebody, then our models need to reflect everything that it's taking into consideration, which makes our job incredibly complex. But if you can imagine, like most kind of ad delivery systems online, it takes a lot of information when it chooses to serve an ad to you. So it's not just taking a look at, are you 18 to 34, male, female? It's considering a whole bunch of other things, like other behavioral data on potentially previous phone ownership, or if it's relevant interactivity with a previous ad. So if you have your base covariates of, let's say, the age, gender, region, everything that we would know that would either influence a conversion or be significant in determining ad exposure to above-the-line activity, all of this is very, very tricky to control for, and it's an important part of the process. So what we found is essentially experimental design is the gold standard. So our method right now to control for this is instead of doing an adjustment or propensity score modeling, when an ad is served, it's a card shuffle deck. So the ad system decides that I'm the appropriate person for the ad. I get to see an ad. The next person exactly like me gets slated to the control group, and so we have a clean, exposed, and controlled experiment. And that enables us to take a look at the incremental effect of the advertising. This enables us to generate insights that kind of fall into two different buckets. One is learning about the audience, learning about how that audience in particular is responding to media. The second is kind of campaign insights, and when I think about campaign insights, that's basically media delivery. Do certain ad types do a better job than others? Is video better than newsfeed, or are mobile impressions better than desktop? So these are the two kind of core types of insights that we're able to generate, and I'm going to start by talking about what we can do with different audience types. So this is something that we see, and we have seen, not only in the study that's featured, but across a number of studies for telcos and for OEMs. Young people are more persuadable by advertising. In this particular instance, we see that if it's a comparison between control and exposed, with the dark blue line being the exposed group, we see that young people are adopting the device at a higher rate. But we also see that young people are more easy to influence with advertising. They're less loyal. They're more kind of promiscuous. They're not beholden to a brand. Specifically when it comes to something like a mobile phone, they're nimble with learning technology, so they don't have the same type of barriers to switching as other demographics. But by taking a look at kind of men and women, we can observe things like which groups are adopting products more, and we can also take a look at what our advertising's ability to actually influence a decision is. We can also take a look at other groups as well. This is an example of a launch that we did for a device that actually was meant to appeal to young professionals. It had features that enabled kind of efficiencies within work. So when we're able to kind of take a look at, again, men and women, but specifically focusing in on young professionals, we see kind of the same type of thing. Young professionals were converting at a greater rate, and the advertising that contained the message of the kind of the features were impacting more. So that's kind of the audience insights that we're able to generate. The other key thing that we want to do is basically observe differences in placement and media, specifically as applied to Facebook. One of the things that we've learned, and one of the things that I mentioned is very hard for a number of reasons, is to measure the impact of mobile. Now, it's still tricky comparing mobile to above-the-line activity to kind of other publishers. And while there's methods that I know you all have for that, what we specifically can do internally within this closed-loop system is to take a look at placements within our own ecosystem at Facebook. So what we found when we compare our different placement types, and just to give you a little background, Facebook has, you've probably seen, we have placements that appear in Newsfeed and Newsfeed on desktop. That fraction of our business, as everybody knows, is significantly minimized in recent years because everybody's moving to mobile. But we're able to kind of take a look at the impact of mobile impressions on conversions vis-a-vis desktop. And what we found is that mobile ads are more effective in driving telco sales at a ratio of around, or at a rate of about 5.5 times more. We can also take a look at reach and frequency. Now, I mentioned that one of the key things that this system allows us to do is to advise advertisers how to plan better. So, for a while and continually, a lot of advertisers optimize for clicks. That probably isn't the right decision if you're trying to convert people to a device. So what can we tell planners about how to plan their campaign in order to create a maximum impact? So if you look at the table above with newsfeed impressions received, and you can take a look at the y-axis is adoption rate. Very simply, in crude terms, adoption goes up with the number of impressions, but that only tells half the story. What an advertiser is concerned about is optimal frequency, because incremental conversions come at a price. And so what's important is to be able to identify where there's diminishing returns. At what point does your next impression serve not equal the weight of the initial impression, and when should you, when do incremental impressions become of no use? So we're able to kind of tell advertisers and to advise on that. Also, you know, as I mentioned before, it's important to, I think, also advise advertisers on maximizing ROI for the right message at the right time. Certain things we know impact a purchase decision. As I mentioned before, there's whether you're up for a contract has a significant bearing on whether you're going to convert to a new device. The iPhone 6 or the Samsung S5, your ability, you might think that device is great, but you have some constraints as to whether you can actually break your contract or you're up for contract. So examining key things that we know are relevant to a purchase decision, whether it's speed of network, whether you've owned the model previously. If you've previously owned an Apple or a Samsung, you're more likely, of course, to choose that device the next time you go to purchase. Contract, whether you're a feature phone. A lot of our work in Africa and the Mideast, where the relationship between carriers and OEMs is very, very different than in mature markets where carriers have a lot of influence on the purchase decision, has involved what is driving the decision to upgrade from a feature phone to smartphone and what is tipping that decision, and generally how long do we see purchase cycles are taking when we observe our data. So we also, I think I'm running out of time, but I also had some research. One thing that we're committed to, because Facebook's also in a good position to observe cross-device usage. We not only have our own data where we can observe things like conversions, especially if we have a kind of pixels installed or conversion pixels installed across on key event sites like purchase pages. But we also can observe what people are doing or add impact on mobile tablets and desktops. This piece of research that we conducted alongside GfK actually took a look. We had a behavioral tracking rate where we actually had people install an app that observed what they were doing. We're in the midst of a study right now that actually, for telcos, that takes a look at what people are searching on for when they're looking for a device. And then we also had a qualitative component, but followed by the main thing, and the main research that I'll go over here is the quantitative kind of element. We had over 2,000 interviews in both the UK and the US as represented by those flags. The key thing that I just want to show is, and this thing we conducted this research and we released it earlier this year. But one thing that we were really surprised about, but was also consistent with our own data, was the large percentage of people that are using more than 3 devices. So if you kind of take a look at people that are using PCs, tablets, and mobiles, 28% across the US and the UK are using all 3. The biggest overlap that we see here, of course, and from our own experience, we can probably verify that, is we're using our smartphones in conjunction with our laptop, and that's 31%. What are they doing? We took a look at what, and we had an angle here, of course. We were trying to figure out, or trying to be able to establish that Facebook wasn't a ubiquitous activity when you look at what people are doing across a mobile, across a tablet. Rates are lower on tablet, but we have a significant amount of people spending time on mobile. Also, interestingly, is the tasking that occurs when people are using multiple devices. 41% of people don't really sit down and kind of finish what they started. They start one activity on one device and they finish on another. And usually, the progression is somebody starts on mobile and then they move to desktop. I think I'm almost out of time. So when people switch devices, as I mentioned before, the progression usually goes, they start an activity on mobile, and from your own experience, you can probably think about that. You go to purchase something, you're interrupted. You're more likely to be interrupted when you're out and about or you're mobile. So we find that, 62% actually begin on the mobile. and then make the transition to another device, primarily PC. And then Facebook is just one of the activities most likely to involve switching devices alongside purchase journey behaviors. So if you kind of take a look at what else people are switching on, playing games, obviously, watching videos, using Facebook, other social networking, researching holidays is something that transcends device as well. And then finally, people are more likely to switch when it's comfortable to do so, where they have most of their devices, and that's usually in someone's home. So the majority of a kind of switching behavior and going from, I guess, task hopping, so to speak, is happening in the home. Thank you. That's basically kind of some research that we've done lately using our own kind of internal systems to measure ad effectiveness, and also that we conducted with multi-device usage alongside GFK. Any questions?
If anybody has questions, please raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
Our partners primarily correspond to, essentially kind of our ad revenues. And when you think about Facebook, and not unlike other online publishers, we're doing a lot with CPG. CPG is, as you know, is a pretty established space among many of our research partners, and that's because it's a focus of a lot of FMCGs and CPGs. So we work heavily, we partner heavily. We have a lot of, I think, partnerships with CPGs as well as telcos. Telcos is within. If you take a look at our business. And the U.S. business, a lot of companies like Facebook start with, we are being led from the U.S. because that's where the majority of headquarters are. But when you take a look at our telco, the majority of our revenues come from rest of world. And so our partnerships and doing research in the Mideast is particularly important. Another thing is that it's harder to measure in Africa and Dubai, and so our strategy, our hope is that we leverage the internal systems that we built. So, this system that's bespoke to Facebook, we can do that in Africa just the same as we can do it in the US, Canada, elsewhere. So we do a lot of work for telcos across Europe, and it was one of our kind of leading verticals within Asia Pacific, primarily for the same reason, where consumer panels don't exist within Asia. We did have the ability to take a look at mobile conversions in the Philippines and Indonesia, for example, where our user base, or our mobile user base in particular, is very, very big. Thanks for the question.